that's the worst thing that could ever happen to them. And so we grow up being taught to fear our own beauty. We grow up being taught to find terror in our own delight and expansion. And so much of what people think coming out is the same thing as being proud. I don't think they're the same. You come out and then you have to spend the rest of the time unlearning the bullshit. And you have to actually learn how to fall back in love with yourself outside of how straight people have taught you to view yourself. And when I look at queer movements across the world, one of my concerns is that they've been tailored to getting straight cis people to accept us. But the truth is straight cis people don't even accept themselves. And I'm actually not really interested in that.
Yeah.
I'm interested in loving myself and not waiting for other people to love me, but granting freedom to myself first. And I think what's happened is that a lot of people think freedom is something that can be conferred or given. But actually freedom is your indisputable right. What I'm saying is joy is your birthright. And what I'm saying is that your happiness is what we're fighting for, not just your rights. What I'm saying is that it's not just about the end of violence or the end of discrimination. It's about the presence of pleasure. It's about transcendence. It's about cunt.
Let's go, let's go.
It's about elevation, right? And if we want to get there, if we actually want to get free, we have to first name, we don't know what freedom feels like because we've been taught to fear the very things that have the potential to set us free. That actually, when we notice freedom in us, first we judge it because the we that we're judging it from is the sedimentation from a straight cis culture that has implanted itself in us. That's why we see so much transphobia within the queer movement, is because a lot of cis gay people are worshiping at the altar of straightness still. And they see trans people as an embarrassment or as a stain, when in fact, what we're here to do is to up the ante, not just the ante. And to up the ante means that actually we should be able to look like whatever the fuck we want without fear of violence, right? We should be able to wear whatever the fuck we want. We should be able to fuck whoever the fuck we want.
Let's go.
Because our bodies belong to us indisputably. And yet, so much of the ways that we've been taught is that our bodies don't belong to us. Think about this thing called gender, right? From the moment that we're born, we're rewarded by performing the gender binary. So if you're allocated female, you're taught to make your voice pitch higher, which by the way shapes the development of your larynx. So you're actually taught to pitch your voice higher, which shapes your voice higher. If you're a boy, you're taught to deepen your voice, not show emotion. And then you get rewarded from that, from the people who say that they love you. I don't think that's love. Love is asking you, how do you want to be? Not telling you what you should be. Love doesn't live in should, it lives in is, right? So from a young age, we're taught that we have to sculpt ourselves into what straight cis people want and not what we want. And so then when we have the bravery and the decency to give birth to ourselves, which is what I think queerness is, self-birth, not waiting. I mean, our parents did an okay job, all things considered, but then the rest was in our hands. Who do we want to become? When we do that work of becoming ourselves, people get really mad. And they get mad because it's like you're disobeying something. And what are you disobeying? You're disobeying the contract that you have to be miserable, right? So we could speak about this in terms of gender and patriarchy, and I think that's part of the conversation, but I like to locate it in pleasure. There's a contract this society has taken to being miserable. And when you live your queer life, what you're actually saying is, I'd rather be magnificent. And people are scared of magnificence. They think magnificence is something that you graduate out of, that you give behind, you grow up, you enter the realm of normalcy, you get unhappily married, you hate yourself, you wear things you don't want to wear, you put on a costume. But what queer life clarifies is, why the fuck would we do that when we could just be having fun? And I forget sometimes that the reason that we're being punished so mercilessly is because we're having fun. It's because of our pleasure.
Yeah.
It's because of our power. And sometimes I worry that anti-rights and conservative groups see our power more than we do.
Yeah.
When you look at them saying we're ending civilization,
Yeah.
when you look at them saying we're destroying society, I'm like, girl, I'm just pulling a lug. Like,
Mm.
and you think
Duh.
about it, and it's like actually maybe pulling a lug can be birthing a new world. And so what we have to do as queer people is we have to be honest that we don't know what our own potential is because it's been so defined in a language that wasn't created for us.
Absolutely.
And what we have to actually do is experiment with another way of being. And the way that we experiment with another way of being is coming together and giving permission to one another to be beautiful, right? And that's why community is important, is we can look at each other dead set in the eyes and we can say, I'm sorry that people have told you to fear yourself, to hunt yourself, to believe that you're ugly. I think you're fucking wonderful.
Absolutely.
And I think you are a miracle. And you're in fact proof to me that the divine is real because you survived. And I'm so grateful that you're here, and let's do something with this. Let's actually have fun together. But instead what we do often is we reenact our childhood trauma on one another. We create hierarchies of who's really queer and who's really trans.
Yeah.
We rank the kind of oppression we have as if it's a game or you win something if you're more in danger, because the only way we've been told we have worth is proximity to violence.
Absolutely.
And I actually think we have worth for being, not doing, right? And so what I hope that we can begin to do is to believe that every queer person, by extension every person, has fundamental worth simply for being, not doing. How do we do that? How do we embark on this journey? I think the first thing we have to do is to name that for many of us, self-hatred has been our most consistent and reliable lover.
Yep.
From a young age, we learned how to hate ourselves as if it was our job, our responsibility. Because when you hate yourself, then you allow people to oppress you. You have no self-advocacy. You understand the oppression against you as a truth, like the weather, something that's fixed and permanent. But when you love yourself, that protest begins with, hey, you're not allowed to treat me like that, right?
Absolutely.
And so we have to accept the fact that we have betrayed ourselves deeply in order to fit into community. And that we've been taught the only way we can belong is by betraying ourselves. And then we have to grieve that. We have to come together and say, I've disappeared myself so much that I don't even know who I am. I don't even know what I could have been, what I would have worn. And we have to hold that pain and that anguish like a twin, a shadow of all the things we never allowed ourselves to be, all the words we could never say, because our bodies remember, even if our minds don't. And then once we feel that pain and we don't judge it, we feel that pain and we take inventory of how awful it is, we commit ourselves to that birthright joy. And we say, I'm gonna try to do something different. And a lot of times people tell me, well, what do I do whenever I can't physically express who I want to be in public? And I totally understand that. But I'm not speaking about that. I'm speaking about who you see when you look in the mirror.
Yeah.
I'm talking about self-acceptance first. I'm talking about being able to look at yourself and see you. See you.
Yes.
And that work is so hard. And I think even harder than
My
anything
goodness.
else. To be able to see you and then to love you.
You. Yeah.
To be able to say, I love you. I am so fucking glad I'm queer. I'm so grateful that I'm trans.
Yeah.
Because what it's given me is clarity and truth. And that's beautiful. And then once you do that work of self-love, you begin to realize that what we're trying to do as a movement is to create a different sense of belonging, where belonging comes from being ourselves, not betraying it.
Yeah.
Where in fact, when other people live their truth, it gives us permission to live our truth, right? It's not a competition. When someone finds themselves, they become a lighthouse for everyone else that shows you that authenticity is possible. I think one of the things we've gotten wrong is we thought that visibility would change straight cis people. I don't think that's work. I think what visibility does is save queer and trans lives.
Absolutely.
That's the difference.
Yes.
We shouldn't be visible to educate straight cis people. We should be visible to give permission to one another to exist, right?
Yep.
Because when we see someone else on rainbow hair or a piercing in the right place.
Let's go. You know?
You see a connection
Yes.
beyond language.
Yeah.
A deep sense of belonging where you're like, I'm not alone.
Mm.
And we all had that moment where you
Yes.
saw that glance or that glimmer of possibility. And that's healthcare. Being able to see each other
Yes.
and being able to find each other, right?
Mhm.
And so sometimes when I'm feeling impossible or lonely or afraid, I remember I'm part of something so much greater,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
And that remembering comes when we come together and we realize I might not have the courage to do this alone, but in this room there's enough courage for all of us, right?
Yes.
Where I experience weakness, you might have strength. Where I
Mhm.
experience strength, you might have weakness. And that's why we have to come together, because we're something so much stronger when we're together. So what I was speaking to my friends about earlier today was desire, and I wanted to speak a little bit about that too. I think often this work of desire, what is the world we desire? Who do we desire? How do we desire ourselves? Gets seen as secondary because the crisis or the emergency is the violence. And once again, I don't want to underestimate what we're all going through and what
Yeah.
we're all facing. And I want to say that if no one has ever told you this, I'm here to say it now. You deserve beauty,
Let's go.
and that's not a luxury.
Yeah.
You deserve peace, and that's not a luxury. You deserve rest, and that's not a luxury. You deserve the ability to be confused and contradictory
Yes.
and complex, and that's
Yeah.
not a luxury.
Yeah.
You deserve to experiment and change your mind, and that's not a luxury. And anyone who tells you that you have to be one thing forever is not someone who loves you.
Yeah.
I actually think that what is so joyous about being queer is that we've lived so many lives in this one. When I look at a photo of myself 15 years ago, I'm like, girl,
What was that?
what was I doing? You know? And then I'm sure that if I looked at myself 10 years from now, I'd be like, what was I doing? And what I was doing was being honest to what I felt in that moment. And that is so beautiful.
Right.
And that's breaking the contract of misery.
Mhm.
Because misery says you have to be one thing forever. Queerness says, why?
Be
Life is
everything in
precious.
every passing day.
When we look at flowers, are they embarrassed to bloom?
No.
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 They understand that the purpose of life is to be beautiful for a while and then just go, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas we glorify martyrdom,
Yeah.
say it's somehow elevated to suffer for other people. I don't believe that. I think what's actually glorious is queer people chilling. What's glorious is queer people dancing and
Yeah.
being. So what I desire for us as a global queer world, and I think that word global is fraught and dangerous, but I'm feeling it deeply now. I come from a place, you might have heard of it, it's a really backwards place, the United States. It's just really a shit show right now. And one of the things that I really feel back home is to our detriment is that a lot of Americans only stay in America and their point of view is so boring and American. And one of my delights in the world is being in places like this is that I remember that actually there's not necessarily a correlation between the law and our lives.
Absolutely.
That even in places that the world sees as inhospitable, there are always queer people having a good time despite it.
Yes.
And that's a truth that we often can't name, which is, okay, it might be the federal policy of my government that there's only two genders, but that's kind of boring, so I'm gonna do something different, you know? And that regardless of what they're doing, which is just self-hatred, there's still queer people having a good time. And I think we have to become bilingual to say that there's those horrible things happening, but alongside it, this is happening. And from some narratives, this might be impossible, and yet we did it. And that gives me so much hope. Before we take some questions and conversations, I wanted to speak a little bit about what I was saying here about this contract of misery and self-hatred. So what I need you to understand is that the reason we're being targeted has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with what we look like. It has nothing to do about our pronouns. It's nothing to do about our appearances, our outfits, our identities. It has nothing to do with us. So therefore, no amount of shape-shifting, no amount of playing pretend, no amount of being palatable no amount of appealing to the majority is going to get people to accept you, because it has nothing to do with you. What it is people outsourcing their own self-hatred out on you.
Yeah.
What hatred is projected self-hatred. Think about it. There's a zillion things people could be doing with their day, right? Cultivating a garden, learning how to do a wing eyeliner, and instead they are wasting their God-given precious time hating for people. That's embarrassing.
Very.
What that shows is that you don't think that your life is worth peace. You are using prejudice as a bridge to run away from your own problems, run away from your own unhappy relationships, run away from your own pain, run away from your own depression, run away from your own guilt, run away from your own history, run away from your own potential future. And so in response to homophobia and transphobia, what I believe the most honest answer is I'm sorry that you hate yourself. I love you more than you could ever hate me.
Yeah.
And that's where I would like us to move, is to realize that we can't beg at the altar of other people's self-hatred. All we can do is say, that must really be hard for you.
So sorry.
Like, I can't even imagine. Like, oh my God, you held a purse. You know, like, what kind of world is that? Where even painting your nails makes you like flip out. Like, there's so many other things to do. And so I feel mercy. I feel so much mercy, because I'm like, you're trapped by a prison of your own design. And actually, the gender binary, gender norms, sexual norms, they're harming everyone.
Yes.
It's just that queer people are being honest about that.
Yep.
And we get punished for being honest about that. Because if these things were as true as they say that they are, as biological and as fixed as they say that they are, why would they be oppressing us?
Yeah.
Why would they need to prove it? Why would they be trying to come and discriminate against us? It's because when you disappear queer people, you disappear possibility. And what queer people represent in society is possibility, is hope, is freedom. So some closing remarks. I just feel so called in this moment to say to you how profoundly proud I am of you. How deeply moved I am that you had the courage and the generosity to gift the world this, your authentic self. You didn't have to do it.
Yep.
You could have hid like a lot of other people. And some part of you was itching for freedom. And that part of you that was itching for freedom is the most intelligent life force on earth. It's what makes seasons change. It's what makes oceans move. It's a magnetism. Octavia Butler says God is change, right? It's that desire to change that I think is so profoundly holy. And some part of you yearned for it even before you had the language. You always knew that there's something different about you. And you found a way to do it, and I feel so fucking proud. And now what we have to do is to spread this gospel to other people, to say, I feel so proud of you, and I love you. And that's how we win. We win by realizing that this is a gift, that our bodies were advocating for ourselves before we couldn't. You know, when I was younger, I was such a little faggot. I mean, it was out of control, you know? So I never was able to come out because everyone already knew, you know? So when I came out, everyone's like, obviously, you know, like, I was really trying to like give drama, but people were like, girl, we've been waiting for this, you know? And I feel really sad because often the only ways that I learned myself as a queer person were through other people's slurs. No one ever asked me, so I was confused because I was like, what does that mean? I am this, but why is that negative? And I feel a lot of loss for that. And the way that I sort of soothe myself then is, for a long time I used to judge my body, being like, why were you so effeminate? Why did you gesture in that way? Why was your voice that pitch of sweetness? Why couldn't you hide? And so I blamed myself. I blamed myself for experiencing violence. And now, as an adult, I have to say, baby, your body was begging for freedom before you even had the words to do it. And it wasn't your fault. You should have been able to be whoever you wanted. It was other people's fault. for hurting you and harming you and making you feel like you had to doubt your inherent. So that reprogramming has led me to believe that actually I feel so lucky because now there's no bullshit in my life. There's no small talk in my life. How can you have small talk when you are walking around in what society perceives as a man in a dress? It's like, how's the weather? You know, people are concerned with other things. And it's a gift because then it means that every interaction you get to be real and truthful.
Yeah.
You get to say, I come with pain, but I also come with beauty, and I've found a way to hold both.
Yes.
And so what I'm asking us to do going forward is to learn how to hold both the grief and the sorrow and the toll of the pain, and the desire and the pleasure and the transcendence.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay.